That's like the action-packed part. So, questions? Anybody have a question? Yes, sir.
How long did you spend in Sitka?
How long did I spend in Sitka? I spent probably altogether about a week. I made 2 trips up there. One, I went all over the Panhandle and part of the time in Sitka, and then I went up again. You know, I mean, it was a weird thing to go there because there wasn't, aside from the physical setting, the mountains and the topography, the water, and the basic geography of the place, you know, none of the stuff I was seeing was actually going to make it into the book. I wasn't going to be, in fact, on the contrary, I was kind of mentally erasing everything I was seeing the whole time I was there. So, you know, I was like, that guy wouldn't be here, and those buildings will have to go. And I mean, it felt kind of sinister, actually, like I was an advance man for an invasion force, you know, and I was taking careful notes on all the things we were going to have to get rid of when my people arrived. So it was a strange experience, and I just went up there again a couple months ago, and or not even a month and a half ago, with the New York Times reporter, and for the first time actually met people who live there, because I had sort of been sneaking around in my spy mode the last 2 times I was there, and I got a very warm welcome. So it just, I guess it proved to me just how lonely it must be to be a spy, because it was a lot more fun the last time when my identity was blown and everybody knew who I was. Yes?
I liked the blending of genres in this. Did you read a lot of alternative history before you wrote it?
Have I read a lot of alternative history? Yeah, I have. I mean, I've always been fascinated by that kind of fiction. I mean, there are some really famous examples. There's a really good novel by, what's his name? The Fatherland. I'm blanking on his name. Robert Harris. And SSGB by Len Dayton, and those are both novels that try to imagine what the world is like if the Germans had won the Second World War. And same goes for The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. And there's a great old novel called Comes the Jubilee that's set in a world in which the South won the Civil War. But I think the most important single work of alternate history to me was an issue of National Lampoon magazine that came out in about 1977, and it was the special 5th inaugural issue of JFK, and it purported to be an issue of National Lampoon from this world in which Jackie Kennedy was accidentally assassinated in Dallas, and she basically took the bullet that was intended for JFK, so he survived, and then the Constitution got re-amended so that he could be re-elected to a 3rd, 4th, and 5th term, and you know, I was born in 1963, almost exactly 6 months before Kennedy was assassinated, and I grew up very much, when I was 14 when that magazine came out, I was still very much a product of that immediate generation after Kennedy's assassination that viewed that whole Camelot period very wistfully as this great moment, this lost moment, and I think we were intended to find something quite poignant in that National Lampoon, even though it was also quite crass and crude and like any other issue of the magazine, and that struck me very forcefully. Imagining what the world would be like if the South had won the Civil War, if the Nazis had won World War II, seemed somehow harder to imagine or less possible to me than that JFK hadn't been assassinated, and my sense that, the sense that was implicit there that somehow the world had gone wrong at that moment. Those other typical alternate reality thing is sort of presenting what if things had gone wrong, like if the Nazis had triumphed, for example, or the South had won the Civil War. But this was presenting in this strange way, like what if things had gone right, and that was much more affecting to me. So I mean, that was a key thing for me. And there are some hidden allusions. There's one reference to Marilyn Monroe. Because JFK in the National Lampoon, he marries Marilyn Monroe after she's his second wife. And so I have a reference to Marilyn Monroe having been First Lady. And the other thing that happened in the National Lampoon is there's no Vietnam just gets shut down right away. It never escalates beyond the initial advisors. I think the advisors are called home, but there's a Cuban war. Because we all know JFK was obsessed with Cuba, so the U.S. goes into Cuba and conquers Cuba, and Cuba becomes a 51st state. And so I have the Cuban War is in the background of this novel and gets mentioned many times. So a lot of the characters are veterans of the Cuban War. So that's my tribute to National Lampoon. Probably more than they deserve. But. Any other questions? Yeah. What's the status of the film of Cavalier and Clay? I get asked that question so many times that it doesn't get any less sad every time I have to tell people that it's you know, it's not as dead as vaudeville, but it's in suspended animation right now. It's Sleeping Beauty, and it's waiting for the prince to come and kiss it, and then all the dogs will wake up and everyone will be awake again and we can get back to work. But no, there's nothing happening. We got so close. We had a cast, well, we had a couple of stars cast. Natalie Portman was cast, and Tobey Maguire, and Stephen Daldry was going to direct it, the man who made The Hours, and Billy Elliot. And I had finished my script, and the production designer had taken his children out of school and enrolled them in school in London because the shooting was going to take place in London. I mean, it was that close, and it just all disintegrated in about a week over money. Yeah. Anyway, oh well, show business. Yes.
When you write your books, do you know where they're going when you start? Many authors say they create the characters develop a life of their own, and then all kinds of things can happen. Do you know what's going to happen?
The question is, do I know what's going to happen when I start writing a novel? And you mentioned that a lot of writers say the characters kind of take over or influence the course of the novel. I think I know where I'm going when I start, but I also always know that just because I think I know where I'm going doesn't necessarily mean that's where I'm going. I typically start out with just the vaguest idea of where I'm going at the end. Hardly any idea at all, really, and I'll write for a while just trying to get a sense of the world that I'm writing about and who my characters are and where they live and what their relationships to each other are and all of that kind of stuff. And after I've amassed a big pile of stuff that's kind of shapeless, then I'll say, okay, now I think I know what my book's about and I think I know where it's going. And then I'll sort of... What are they saying? Can anyone understand them? You know, and then I'll make a plot outline and get a clear sense of where I'm going. But even at that stage, knowing that it's not gonna probably be accurate, and I would deviate from it eventually. I don't ever feel like the characters take over exactly, or that they have a life of their own in the sense that they start. It's not that they start doing the things they want to do, because that sounds a little like. You know, woo-woo to me. But what happens is that you get to know your characters a lot better, and because you know them better, you realize the things that you had planned for your outline, just they wouldn't do that. Because you didn't realize how sensitive this character was when you thought he was just going to be a big jerk, and it turns out he's not so much of a big jerk. So he would never do this thing that you wanted him to do, and then you have to change your story. You know, so you do make discoveries about your characters along the way. But it's not quite like they take over so much as that you learn to know them better, at least for me. Yeah.
Are there some particular American crime writers that inspired you?
Are there some particular American crime writers that inspire me? Well, Raymond Chandler he's one of my favorite writers, period, crime or not. And I think The Long Goodbye is like one of the greatest American novels of the 20th century, and I love all of his work, even the stuff that's not so good. And I love Ross MacDonald, who is kind of the great successor to Raymond Chandler, and he created a detective similar in some ways to Philip Marlowe named Lou Archer. And those novels they're probably better as novels than the Chandler novels on average. They're much better constructed, and they're beautifully written, and Ross McDonald was a really intelligent, literate writer also. And then in the new, I like Dennis Lehane, and in the new sort of generation of hard-boiled writers, and Pelicanos is great, and Elmore Leonard is, also I think one of my favorite writers. I'll read anything. I actually really like his Western fiction a lot, sort of neglected. I don't know if Richard Price qualifies as a crime writer exactly, but there's something hard-boiled in his writing, and that I respond to on that same level of heart that I respond to people like Lehane and Pelicanos. Yeah.
So I read some
You have?
Yeah. And I've done book reports and everything on it, but I think I know pretty well. But I was wondering what the inspiration was to write this sort of book rather than just sort of book more aimed like young adult.
Why did I write Summerland, a novel for younger readers?
Yeah.
Because I live with younger readers. I have 4 children, and when my oldest daughter, who's now 12 and a half, started really getting into reading when she was about 8 or 9, or even 7 or 8. She started to read the books that I loved when I was younger, like Susan Cooper's Dark as Rising sequence, and the Narnia books, and she got really into Harry Potter, so I had to check out the whole Harry Potter thing, and just I know it was so exciting for me to just re-encounter children's literature, and especially the children's literature that I had loved. I just put the idea in my head of trying to do something like that myself, because when I started wanting to be a writer, I was a child, and I thought I was going to grow up to write the kind of fiction I liked to read at the time, which was mostly about mice, or about guys with swords or whatever, and that's what I liked, and that's what I thought I was going to write, and there was always a part of me, I think, somewhere down inside that was saying, what's all this stuff you're writing about, professors with drug habits and all this kind of stuff, like, why aren't you writing about mice? So it was just the excuse I finally needed to write the kind of book I wanted to write, all along. Yeah. Why did I choose the passage I read tonight? Because I've been reading the other passages that I had chosen over the past 2 weeks so many times that I wouldn't say I'm sick of them, but I'm kind of sick of them. So I wanted to try something different. Why, you didn't think it worked? You didn't think it worked? Oh. Do you have a critique that you'd like to offer? No? Okay. Yeah. Are you sure? Now's your chance. No? Okay.
Are the Yiddish words used in the book, and if so, how did you learn Yiddish?
I missed the first part. What?
Are they authentic Yiddish words?
Are they authentic Yiddish words I use in the book? Yeah. My idea in writing this novel was that it was all written in Yiddish, and that I was going to write it in Yiddish in my mind and then simultaneously translate it into English for the reader, which I had to, I don't know why I thought I could do such a thing, but I thought I could do it. And so it's all written in English. The only time you encounter words in Yiddish are when there are slang terms, like sholem that we heard tonight. That is the slang term here for gun. It means peace, actually. Peace, like peace be unto you, peace. But so it's a pun on peace. And that's how Yiddish criminals made their slang back in the day, was with bilingual puns like that. It was a way of sort of keeping non-Yiddish speakers out of the loop. And so I researched criminal slang, Yiddish criminal slang. There's a lot actually that's been written about it, and that's really the only time you encounter actual Yiddish in the book. Otherwise, it's all translated. But I studied Yiddish on my own independently. I didn't take classes. I just read books, and I have a grammar book and a dictionary, 2 dictionaries, and I did the best I could. I just tried to learn as much as I thought I needed to know to be able to do this. So stekela, that's another one that just means like a little stick. That's what the donut looks like, so that's what it's called. I don't know if there really is such a thing as a Filipino-style Chinese donut. I didn't think so. I thought I made it up, but then somebody told me they do make donuts in the Philippines. And anyway, I'm still waiting to find that one out. Yeah. How about somebody else?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
My book group read Cavalier and Clay on the recommendation of Andrew Sean Greer.
Oh, really? That was
Yeah.
nice of him.
Wasn't it
So you
nice?
just ran into Andy in the street and
He
he's
came
like,
to my house.
oh, he came
for
to your house?
dinner. Yes, he did. He remarked on the research that you did for that book, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a
About the
little
research
about
I did for Cavalier and
Cavalier
Clay?
and Clay.
I just made it all up. He was lying. I didn't really do it. No, I did a lot of research. I spent hours in libraries and going through old magazines and back issues of the New Yorker, bound a year at a time, looking at old ads, reading the old articles. I went through old newspapers, read a lot of history books, conducted a few interviews with living, surviving comic book creators from the time that the ones I could get to it at that time. When I started writing that book, I didn't know anybody in the comic book business. Now alas, most of those guys have died, but eventually I got to meet a whole lot of them. But yeah, I mean, research is, all writers do research. I think writers enjoy research. The great thing about doing research is you don't have to write. So that's the great virtue of research, is that it doesn't involve writing. So it's always, like, if I had the choice of trying to write for 4 hours or going to the library to look through old New Yorker magazines, which would you pick?
Exactly.
Maybe 2 more questions? Yeah.
So, Spider-Man 2, great movie. Spider-Man 3 sucked. Why didn't you work on it? Why didn't you go and
Are you
save
implying
the
there's a
script?
causal connection there?
I
I'm not
mean-
agreeing with your judgment necessarily. If that
Actually, my friend came up with the analysis, but I agree with it entirely.
The question was it wasn't quite a question. It was, Spider-Man 2, the gentleman enjoyed Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3 not so much. I wrote a draft of the screenplay for Spider-Man 2. I did not have any involvement with Spider-Man 3, so there's an implied connection there to my presence on the project. It's funny because when I first came in on Spider-Man 2, I went in for my first meeting and I had read prior drafts, the script they had up to that point, and they had Dr. Octopus, the Black Cat, which is this crappy Catwoman knockoff from Marvel Comics. It's like the Marvel Comics imitation of Catwoman, and I want to say the Lizard. I think they had the Lizard, and then they had Harry Osborn, inheriting his father's Green Goblin mantle. So they had like 5 super costume, super characters. And the first thing I said was, we just have to get rid of everybody but Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus because it's just too many characters. It's crazy to try to put that many into the movie. And they agreed with me. And even though I wrote my draft and I ended up being fired and replaced, they kept that even in the final movie. There's only 2 costumed super characters, and I really think it's a big problem that in this movie, the Spider-Man 3, they once again have 4 costume, or 5 in a way, costume super characters. If you count Peter Parker wearing the black costume as 2 Spider-Man, and adds up to 5. I think it is a merchandising thing. It's like the more toys they put in the movie, the more Happy Meal things they can have. So I think that's I'm sad to say that's part of the motivation, might be part of the motivation behind it, but thank you. Tell your friend I said thank you.
Thank you.
I would have, they didn't ask me back.
Well, at least there's one great movie in the franchise. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, in the back now.
What have you read lately that you recommend? And number 2 is I've read all of your wife's mommy track mysteries. And how much of Peter is you?
Okay, question 2 first. How much of the character of Peter in the Mommy Track Mysteries is me? All the good parts. My favorite thing that Peter does in that book is there's this, he comes in one morning and she's made, or it's one evening and she's made like eggs and bacon for dinner, and she says, and he raises an eyebrow and she's like, breakfast for dinner, it's great. And then later in the book, about 100 pages in, Julia Applebaum, has to leave him with the kids and goes away. When she comes back, it's morning time and they're having hot dogs. and she comes and she's like, what the hell is this? And he says, dinner for breakfast. What have I read lately that I loved? Well, I mean, the last book that I read that's a recent book that I really loved was the last Thomas Pynchon novel, Against the Day. I just, it's like 1,100 pages long, and when it ended, I wished it was 600 pages longer. I just really loved it. The whole time I was reading it, I was so happy. So that's probably the last book I loved that's a recent vintage. Right now I'm rereading Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, which I haven't read since I was in high school, and it's so good, and she's such a great writer. She's so unjustly neglected and put into this ghetto of science fiction as if that was as much as you could ever say about her work, and as much as it's completely science fiction, it's truly great literature. She's a beautiful writer. I love the book. It's so much better than I remembered it being. I mean, I thought it was good. It's even better. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and I'll be up here signing books, so come on up.